Okay, welcome to Sociology. This is your Unit 2 test review. So this will cover chapters 4, 5, and 6. All right, what term describes a position in life that one does not choose? This is awarded at birth. All right, this is an ascribed status. You also need to know that an achieved status is a position one obtains by their own choices, positive or negative. You need to know that a status symbol is a designation of a status. This is not prestigious necessarily. If someone is a convicted felon and they are forced by law to put a sign in their yard, or the famous Scarlet Letter was a status symbol in literature. A master status is the one social position that seems to garner the attention of the community more so than any other position. You need to know that roles are the behaviors, obligations, and privileges attached to a position a person occupies in life. You need to know that an ascribed status is a social position. Status is a position, whereas a role is the socially expected behavior. So a status is a position, whereas a role designates socially expected behavior. A social institution most concerned about life after death is religion. Gemeinschaft is to intimate community what Gesellschaft is to impersonal association. Impersonal association. The Thomas theorem says that if people define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. If people define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. You need to know that William Chambliss conducted research on the Saints and Roughnecks, demonstrating the need for both macro and micro sociology, often in the same study. As societies become more industrialized, social institutions become more formal. As societies become more industrialized, social institutions become more formal. Social institutions, the social institution most concerned with protecting a society from its enemies and natural or national interests, this is the military. Great Britain is credited as being the place where the Industrial Revolution began in 1765. In a biotech society, you might expect cloning of plants and animals. prevention of disease, developing crops, all genetically. You would not expect mass production of industrial goods and conspicuous consumption. The use of personal space, as discovered by Edward Hall, differs from culture to culture. Amount of personal space preferred differs from culture to culture. A group is defined as people who think of themselves as belonging and interacting with one another. A group of people sharing space are made up of an aggregate. People sharing space but having nothing else in common make up an aggregate. People who share characteristics and nothing else make up a category. Sociological term best describing people in romantic relationships, cult members, or those in a infantry platoon make up a primary group. You need to know that secondary groups often break down into primary groups. Secondary groups oftentimes break down into primary groups. A secondary group is often impersonal, face-to-face, anonymous, and formal. So a secondary group is formal, impersonal, and anonymous. Formal, impersonal, and anonymous. The iron law of oligarchy says that organizations are dominated by a small, self-perpetuating elite. Small, self-perpetuating elite. If members of rival gangs would make up outgroups. Outgroups. The small world phenomenon was studied by Stanley Milgram. The initial conclusion drawn from the small world phenomenon was that society is unconsciously linked together by mutual acquaintances. When replicating Milgram's small world study, Judith Kleinfeld found that Milgram's original experiment was not representative of average people. So essentially, the world is much larger for the poor and less educated. Individuals who relatively meet and interact online make up an electronic community. A bureaucracy has division of labor, written rules, communications of records, and individuals are treated impersonally. The March of Dimes has deviated from its original purpose. It was created many years ago This is goal displacement. Bureaucracies depend on red tape, which are rules that defy all logic. One would most likely find bureaucratic alienation in a large corporation. And a dyad is made up of two people. It is impossible to form a coalition in a dyad. Solomon Asch experiment on group conformity found that because of group pressure, most people are willing to say things they know are not true. In Stanley Milgram's teacher-learner experiment, some will follow orders, even inflicting pain on other people, simply because someone in authority has told them to. For a deviant act to be written into crime, for a deviant act to be identified as a crime, it must be written into law. Blindness, mental handicap, and obesity are all conditions that result in stigma. Norms make social life possible. Norms make social life possible. If in certain Islamist societies, an act of sacrifice might warrant 72 virgins, this would elicit a positive sanction, the idea that a person is rewarded upon their martyrdom. Social control is the concept where formal and informal means enforce norms. Sociologists would most likely use differential association theory to explain deviant behavior. Primary difference between psychological and sociological theories of deviance is that sociological explanations typically focus on factors outside of the individual. Psychological explanations typically focus on factors within the individual. Sociologists would most likely use social class when explaining deviance. Based on control theory, inner controls are more effective when we have strong attachments, commitments, and involvement with society, or our outer controls are stronger. According to control theory, our attachments, our commitments, our involvements, and beliefs all relate to our bond with society. Labeling theory places significance on the names and reputations given to people when they engage in certain types of behavior. So Emil Durkheim listed several reasons why deviance could be functional for society, in that it affirmed norms, promoted unity, promoted social change. According to Merton's strain theory, conformity is the most popular form of adaptation. And marriage and education are society's anchors for protecting them and keeping them from becoming prisoners. All right, here's your test review. I hope this has been useful for you. Go ahead and study, commit these to memory, use flashcards, and you have a little more, a week and then a few days to study for this. All right, take care.